Years back, I lectured to a capacity crowd at the University of California at Berkeley. And I made the case against moral relativism. And that's the idea that there's no objective morality, there's no rule over everyone, it's just a matter of individual opinion. I was making the case against that simply by pointing out how every day of our lives we each encounter and we ultimately violate genuine, deep morality. I mean, objective morality. I mean, absolute morality. And we know it. And this discovery, I pointed out to the audience, had explanatory power because it accounts for something else that we all know: guilt. Now, why do we all feel guilty? Oh, maybe guilt is a cultural construction, I offered to him. But there's another possibility. Maybe, I said, we feel guilty because we are guilty. Now, you might think that this was a bold stroke, but there was no risk for me at all. Because I have asked this question so many times of audiences, and no one has ever stopped me afterward and told me, no, I don't experience guilt. They didn't because they knew better. More to the point, for this tactic, I knew better. Even though I'd never met a single one of them before that night, there was something that I knew to be true for each of them on the inside that they couldn't keep from revealing on the outside. And they knew it too. And that insight is at the heart of a maneuver that I want to introduce to you that has served me really well over the years. I call it the inside-out tactic. Now, the inside-out tactic is not so much of a specific maneuver as it is a frame of mind. It provides an insight that will help you maneuver confidently, even creatively sometimes, in your conversations with other people. In a sense, you have inside information on others that they're going to eventually acknowledge, and sometimes without even realizing it, if you just pay attention. Now, a perfect example from one of atheists' most colorful apologists, actually, Richard Dawkins. You heard of this guy. Now, remember, according to his naturalistic worldview, morality is just a relativistic trick of evolution to help you get your selfish genes into the next generation. Nothing more. As he puts it, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Okay, I get it. That's right. It fits his naturalism. But at another time, he rails against the God of the Old Testament as a, and I'm quoting here, vindictive, bloodthirsty, homophobic, racist, genocidal, sadomasochistic, malevolent bully. You see a problem there? You see, this is not Dawkins's naturalism speaking. This is his common sense moral realism doing the talking. And his protest there makes absolutely no sense in his minimalist molecules in motion world, but it is perfectly consistent with the world that actually exists, God's world. Now, I want you to notice something here. There is something true on the inside for Dawkins the atheist, something he knows that he cannot help but display on the outside in unguarded moments. When he's defending his philosophical turf as a naturalist, he tells the lie. When his guard is down, his humanity betrays him, and he tells the truth in spite of himself. And when I say he tells the truth, he's not telling the truth about God, but the way he's talking about God is something that is completely at home in a Christian worldview, the worldview that applies to reality, the world that we all live in. Now, why does something like this happen? Why would the atheist Richard Dawkins, in a certain sense, talk like a Christian in terms of worldview? Well, the inside-out tactic is based on an insight that I learned from the late Francis Schaeffer, and it's helped me to navigate more confidently in conversations with others about Christ. And this insight he called the mannishness of man. Strange phrase, I agree, but still there's a provocative notion here because Schaeffer's insight is tied to the question, what does it mean to be human? Okay. And of course, there's one answer, the response of naturalism, the response of the atheist. And that, by the way, is the worldview that's currently governing science. So what's that answer? According to the pop science guy, Bill Nye, we're just a speck on a speck, orbiting a speck among other specks, okay? Carl Sagan, speaking in the same tradition, said, we emerged from microbes and muck, and we find ourselves in a bottomless free fall, lost in a great darkness, and there's no one to send out a search party. And they're right, of course, in a world without God. Okay? Humans are nothing but cogs in the celestial machine. We are cosmic junk. We are the ultimate unplanned pregnancy. And we are left to build our lonely lives on what atheist philosopher Bertrand Russell called the unyielding foundation of universal despair. That's it. Nihilism, bleak nothingism, okay? But here's the key to this tactic. No one believes that, not even those guys, not deep down inside. Solomon said that God has set eternity in our hearts, which leads us to a better answer to the question, what does it mean to be human? It's a better answer because it's more accurate. And this is an answer that we all know, believer and non-believer alike. Simply put, in Schaeffer's words, man is different from non-man. Humans are special, we are unique, we are unlike anything else in the created realm. We are, as David put it in the Psalm, crowned with glory and honor. And that's not just a religious statement, that is a statement about reality. And that's what Schaeffer means by the mannishness of man. At the core of our beings lies a mark. It's an imprint of God himself, not on us as if it was somehow foreign and attached, but in us as a natural feature built into our natures. This mark is part of what makes us what we are, who we are. We wouldn't be humans without it. We'd only be creatures. Carl Sagan says we are cousins of apes. Well, that's Mother's assessment. Mother Nature's assessment, that is. Father says different. Because of this mark, we are not kin to apes. We are kin to the God who made us for himself. So here's the takeaway. Because we all live in God's world and we are all made in God's image, there are things all people know embedded deeply within their hearts, profound things about our world and about ourselves. Even though we deny them, even though our worldviews disqualify them, we still know them. Paul wrote, that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. He said that in Romans 1:19. In other words, that which is already on the inside, put there by God himself, eventually shows itself on the outside, in our actions, in our language, in our expressed convictions. That is, our mannishness cannot be suppressed. And this knowledge can make a big difference in your conversations. So here's my tactical application of the mannishness of man. The profound truths we all know on the inside always eventually reveal themselves on the outside. That's it. All you need to do is listen. Now, sometimes the inside-out factor reveals itself in unusual ways. For example, in the late days of summer 1997, two well-known and well-loved women died within days of each other. But there was a public reaction to each death that was very, very different in each case. Mother Teresa passed away peacefully at 87, her death a quiet conclusion of a noble life well lived. But Princess Diana died in her prime at 36, her death a tragic, untimely intrusion into a life filled with promise. So here's my question. Why did so many react so differently to the same kind of event? A life ending, a human being dying. I mean, from one point of view, an atheistic, materialistic one, no one dies before her time, an untimely death. Death is death. It arrives when it arrives, and there's no timeliness for anything since there is no timetable. Not on that view. There's no schedule. There's no plan of how things are supposed to be. Everything just is. In a God-blessed universe where all meaning is of our own making, what could it possibly mean to say that someone died an untimely death? I'll tell you what it means. It means that people know better. That's what it means. It means they know deep down inside that life has ultimate purpose and deep significance that transcends our private projects. And in spite of their pontifications to the contrary, their mannishness gives them away. And there are lots of things like this if you look for them. Say people endorse moral relativism because it's convenient. I did as a non-Christian 45 years ago when I was in college. I like the idea that there is no morality. I can do whatever I want. That's convenient. But then we're mortified at the genuine evil that assails the world. And we struggle with the guilty consciences, as I mentioned earlier, for our own participation in that. If moral relativism is true, what sense can be made of those two things? But moral relativism isn't true, and we know it. Our mannishness is speaking when we react to those things. People deny conscious design in the universe. But then, did you ever notice this? Kind of reflexively invoke the wonders of Mother Nature. Why do they say that? Because it looks like someone's messing with the system. Not Father God, Mother Nature. And so when they are overwhelmed by the magnificence of God's world, they deny Father, but they praise Mother, and on and on and on. Lots of examples of this. So understanding this inside-out pattern provides a powerful technique to get someone thinking. Okay, here's what Francis Schaeffer wrote. He said that the truth that we let in first is not a dogmatic statement of the truth of the Scriptures, but rather the truth of the external world and the truth of what man is in himself. This is what shows him his need. And then he says, once people know their need, the Scriptures then show the real nature of his lostness and the answer to it. Now, here's how Schaeffer's insight can be useful to you. 2 steps. First, listen to the way people talk. Watch for when, from their own mouths, their acknowledgement of reality intrudes on their own philosophies. In other words, watch for when their words, sometimes without them even realizing it, betray their true convictions about the world. Not convictions that they hold in their worldview, but a truth about the world, like I've been describing. Second step, you exploit that tension by asking a question. So, in a world without purpose, why is Princess Di's death a tragedy? If there is no ultimate universal morality, how can anything be really evil? Why try to talk someone out of a suicide? If there's no meaning to life, what's the point? So you see how this works a little bit. Mother Teresa finished her course. Princess Diana did not. That is the victory and the tragedy of those events in the waning days of summer 1997. But only because there is a divinely intended purpose, a noble end humans have been designed for that sin, sadly, cuts short. Let me give you another example of how this works. It's akin to the one I just mentioned. The inside truth finding its way to the outside, so to speak. Everyone knows that something has gone terribly wrong with the world. It doesn't matter when you lived or where you lived. We all know things are not right. We call it the problem of evil. And it often prompts the question, why is there so much badness in the world? What about God? Where was he? But there's a wrinkle to this concern, another detail each of us also knows. It's not just that the world is broken. That's true. But we are broken too. Though human beings have inherent dignity, that's something we know, we are also cruel. The evil, well, it is out there in a sense, but it's also in here. It's in us. And we're not machines that are malfunctioning. We are not bodies that are ailing. We are subjects who revolted. We are rebels who are now morally corrupted. We are guilty. And for this, we must answer. And again, this is something that every single person knows deep down inside. It was the inside out point that I was trading on when I was lecturing at Berkeley. We are the others doing those evil deeds that we object to. Deep inside of us, there's a gnawing awareness of our own badness, and it produces a feeling that we universally recognize, and that feeling is called guilt. In our moral wretchedness, we are also profoundly guilty. We owe, we are in debt, not to a standard, not to a rule, not to a law, but to a person. We are in debt to the one that we have offended with our disobedience. And this is not good news, because our guilt has severe consequences. And this awareness leads to my next point. Not only do we know that we're guilty, but we also have a longing for justice. In fact, we speak of it all the time, especially when we've suffered the injustice. That's the inside revealing itself on the outside again. Justice is not satisfied in this life, though. It is satisfied in the next. At the end of the Bible, we find a dark passage, Revelation 20. It tells us of the final event of history as we know it. And there's a great trial on a great plain where a great multitude of the accused, the guilty ones, stand before a judge. And the books of death are opened. And each of our moral lives is laid bare for all of mankind to see. The record in the books, the basis for our final judgment. Before the judge stand all the beautiful, broken, guilty ones, each shut up under sin. Every mouth is shut. Each voice is muted, silence from any defense or any appeal or any excuse. The record in the books speaks for itself. And this is Sagan's bottomless freefall. This is his acknowledgement of mankind lost in a great darkness. And he is right about that, because we're all guilty and no judge owes us a pardon. Atonement must be made. The debt must be paid. Justice must be perfect. That's the bad news. But there's something else. I didn't leave the students at Berkeley abandoned under the weight of blame that all of us share. Here's what I said to them. I said the answer to guilt is not denial. That's relativism. I said the answer to guilt is forgiveness. And this, I said, is where Jesus comes in. Now, I have made that point many, many times to audiences, and every single time I say those words, the answer to guilt is forgiveness, something moves inside of me. Forgiveness, mercy, repair, restoration, rebirth, new life, hope. This is what each of our souls longs for on the inside. Sagan is right when he says we're lost, but he is wrong when he says there is no one to send out a search party. Clearly, we need rescuing, and we can't rescue ourselves. Help must come from the outside, from outside of us, from outside of Sagan's closed cosmos, from outside of this world. And our message to all the broken souls who know they're broken is this: the search party has arrived. The rescuer has come. He's the one who calls to us, "Come unto me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For I am gentle and I am humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." You know, Augustine of Hippo most famously described the restlessness of the human soul and its proper place of repose. He wrote in his Confessions, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you. I think it's safe to say that this restlessness, this sense of longing, this ineffable yearning to be filled, or maybe yearning to be fixed, is a universal human affliction. That's what's on the inside. But it's a malady that has nothing to do with our natural appetites, because satisfying those things never satisfies the hungers of our heart. Two facts of the human condition lie at the heart of our inescapable sense of longing. One, as I've mentioned, is that we're broken. The second is this: it hasn't always been this way. There is a remnant that remains of a former beauty that the brokenness cannot destroy. Yet something has gone missing that must be replaced. We feel this in our souls, that we feel it might be called a sweet pain, a primal memory deep in our souls that reminds us of the way the world started, good and wonderful and whole and complete. We were made for something better, and we scrap and we scrape to climb back up to return to the heights, every one of us, believer and non-believer alike. To show how universal our awareness is of this, what I've just mentioned, that struggle is central to just about every film we have ever seen and every story we have ever read. Now, in Hollywood, they call it the triumph of the human spirit, which is, of course, God's image forcing its way to the surface, to the outside. Now, there are exceptions, those dark, nihilistic yarns, those dystopian tales that tell us the lie that we are nothing. But note the conflicting visions, the vision buried deep within our humanity, and the contrary vision flowing from the atheistic nothingism view of reality. Atheism, of course, denies the guilt. It has to. Without good, there's no bad, all right? Atheism also denies the beauty. Again, it has to, because if there is no God, there is no guided design. There are only biological accidents, physical parts that are stuck together with no reason, with no purpose, cosmic junk. Human beings are nothing, and this life means nothing. Atheism leaves us once again with nothing. But our true longing betrays us. It's a hunger that atheism simply cannot satisfy. It's a thirst that atheism cannot quench. Holly Ordway was an atheist. She wrote the book, Not God's Type. She watched her soul suffer injury. She watched her soul corrupted by a belief, atheism, that did not fit reality. Here's what she said. She said, "My atheism was eating into my heart like acid. I could not have explained the source of my own rationality," she wrote, "nor of my conviction that there were such things as truth and beauty and goodness. My worldview remained satisfying to me only insofar as I refrained from asking the really tough questions." Notice, by the way, how vigorously the truths that were already built into Holly Ordway by God were asserting themselves against her will. That was the inside coming out. In the end, Holly was not drawn to God because of DNA or irreducible complexity or the fine-tuned constants of the universe, these kind of standard apologetics things, the left brain evidence, so to speak. Rather, she first saw God in John Keats and John Donne and Gerard Manley Hopkins, the great poets of her literary discipline. In short, she was alerted to God by beauty. As an atheist, she had been dining on despair for years, and she was starving. She wrote, "However satisfied I declared myself intellectually, atheism was a terrible place to live. It was the winter of my soul." Now, the thaw began as a newly minted college professor. Ordway reread the canonical poets of English literature and for the first time realized that the soul-satisfying beauty of their verse flowed naturally and natively from their Christian view of the world, God's world. She wrote, I sensed something deeper in the poems I was reading. I could feel the power thrumming in the lines of the poems, an electricity of meaning drawing from some source beyond my reach. So, the world of Hopkins and Keats and John Donne was a world where transcendent beauty made sense, where longing and hunger could be satisfied, where rising up from the fall was possible, a world where there was hope. A realistic hope, though, or an empty wish? C.S. Lewis gives the answer. Here's what he said: if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. This other world was the one that Holly Ordway hungered for. This was the understanding that made sense of the actual world she lived in. But there was a dark side to her discovery. The understanding of reality that made sense of beauty and meaning and hope also made sense of the world's brokenness, both completely unintelligible in Holly Ordway's atheism. And the disturbing part for her was this: the brokenness that was real was also moral and personal. Here's what she said. She said, I considered myself a good person, but in my heart, I was afraid to be judged on the real self behind my outward image. She was guilty, and she knew it. French philosopher Guillaume Bignon found his own naturalistic atheism being challenged as he encountered Christ in the New Testament. But the cross confused him. Why did Jesus have to die? He asked. And he asked this question over and over again as he worked through the historical account of Jesus' life. It made no sense to him. Then something completely unexpected happened to Guillaume. God reactivated my conscience, he said, and that was not a pleasant experience. I was physically crippled by guilt, not knowing what to do about it. And then suddenly it dawned on him. That's why Jesus had to die. Because of me. Because of my guilt. And Guillaume Bignon immediately got on his knees and surrendered all of his brokenness to the only one who could repair it, giving all of his guilt to the only one who could forgive. And when he did, he told me the feelings of guilt just evaporated. Atheism cannot do this. It cannot explain the beauty. It cannot explain the wonder of being human. It has no answer to human brokenness. It cannot provide the consolation of true forgiveness. Yet, we are all fallen. We are all guilty. We are all lost, and we cry out. And here is our remedy, stated simply in a Christmas card that I received from a friend. Here's what it said. The birth of Christ invites us to believe that the cries of a broken world have actually been heard. A Savior was born. So there are times when good arguments will evade you. And that's when, maybe, a simple declaration of the truth might be all that's needed. A simple appealing to the existential hungers of the human heart, a hunger that responds to this: come unto me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And that is an offer of meat to hunger and drink to thirst. Take advantage of the inside-out insight. Touch the existential nerve, that deep, profound desire that throbs in every single fallen human being made in the image of God. Listen carefully in your conversations. Listen for when a person's mannishness speaks. And when they tell the truth, and they have to eventually, just point it out. My question to the audience at Berkeley was a direct application of the inside out tactic. I addressed those students confidently since I knew something critically important. Even though a person can run from God, he cannot run from himself. And that is the key to the inside out tactic.